Hi, Southern California Earthquake Center. Thanks for having me today. I'm really sorry I'm not there with you in person, but I'm here to talk to you about open access in earthquake science. And I want to acknowledge the real experts in open access who contributed to this presentation. Sam Teplitzky, the UC Berkeley Earth Sciences librarian, and Jessica Lange, who's the scholarly communications librarian at McGill University, and my fellow members of the Seismica board. So let's start with a brief look at some key events in the history of research communications. In Europe and the United Kingdom, scientists would present at society meetings one to the other. They started to circulate transcriptions of those presentations to the membership. In 1752, the Royal Society introduced peer review and basically created the journal as we know it. Fast forward to the mid-20th century, many society journals, some peer-reviewed, some more like newsletters, started making arrangements with publishing companies to for dissemination services, and later the publishing companies started to acquire those journals and publish them for profit. The internet revolution of the 90s came along and democratized and reduced the cost of communication across all areas of society except for academic publishing. For various reasons, the cost of access to academic journals just carried on going up and up. And in the last 20 years, more and more nations, more and more funding agencies have started to require that the research that they pay for is made available open access. So that means making sure that everyone can access the products of that publicly funded research. So let's look at some of the players in this system. We have the funding agencies from whom all money flows, and money is going to be tracked in this diagram with green arrows. Some of that money goes to universities and libraries who turn that into access to research information for researchers and authors. Most of their money goes directly to the researchers themselves. And then we have this beautiful symbiosis between scientific societies and the researchers, authors. I should have maybe made those even overlapping because it's the same people. But the researcher authors fund the scientific societies. The scientific societies turn around and use those funds for things that we have a lot of value in the community, like affordable meetings and scholarship programs. And so not only do we have money flowing back and forth between researchers and societies and the green arrows, but we also have uncompensated labor, volunteer organization that contributes to research dissemination and community building. So let's introduce a couple of more players. The publishing companies now collect a lot of that revenue. So from universities, we have subscription fees that are paid directly to the publishing companies. Researchers and authors are paying author fees, page charges, and open access charges to the publishing companies. Scientific societies are also paying the publishing companies for providing services, and the researcher authors and the scientific societies are doing free labor for the publishing companies, writing articles for free, writing reviews for free, and most of the editing is also done essentially for free. And scientific societies who have their journals housed at a publishing company are also recruiting papers on behalf of that publishing company. So what is the publishing company giving back to us? Well, the two major things they're really providing are dissemination services. They process what we give them and they spit it back out so everyone can see it. And critically, they are giving us individual prestige or impact for papers or for individual authors. And then we have the stakeholders. So for the purposes of this slide, those are people who have reason to want access to the products of publicly funded research. So it could be planners, emergency management people. It could be researchers that are outside of the well-funded bubble who are getting university library access. That could be in different parts of the world where they don't have money for those subscription fees or it's not well organized. They could be people in private industry. They could be students, educators, and researchers and authors want to share their results with these stakeholders. There's a huge movement toward outreach and the creation of explicit products for non-specialists that are coming off of research. But there's something in the way, which is the paywall. So the publishing companies mostly hold the copyright for our research once we submit it or once it's accepted as a paper. And so that means that they're charging subscription fees, and there's only a small leakage through the paywall where stakeholders can see the outcome of the research. Okay, so this is the motivation behind the open access movement. First of all, the public is paying for the research. The public should be able to read and the research, and this is increasingly being required by funding agencies. You probably heard the news 2 weeks ago that the White House issued a memo saying that NSF funded, all federally funded research is going to be open access in the near future. The other knock-on effects of open access are to advance research in areas where subscription costs are prohibitive. And that's just outside of the academic circles, wherever that might be. It also has the effect of accelerating innovation in the private sector. And these are the kind of things that motivate publicly funded research in the first place. This idea that, we're going to make discoveries and that's going to disseminate into more technology, more useful practices throughout society. So there are 3 types of open access that are generally in play. We have gold open access. That's when the final journal formatted copy, the really beautiful PDF, is freely distributed. And in these cases, the author is paying for that by paying the journal. There's green open access. That's where a preprint or a previous draft can be disseminated by the author, either through a repository, putting it on their website or their ResearchGate, and they're licensed to do that. And then there's diamond, where the paper's just free and there are no fees and anyone can read it. No money. So let's break down gold open access into the 2 types, because this is really illustrative of what's going on. A gold open access journal is one that has a flat author fee and all the papers that come through that journal are free to read. And in the natural sciences, the average amount of that fee is about $18.50. In a hybrid journal, there is a paywall. The journals are still collecting subscription, but individual papers, if the author makes a payment, can be made open access. And the average payment that authors have to do in a hybrid journal is $2,800. So lest you think that the increasing cost has anything to do with the increasing cost to the publisher, several studies have shown that author fees scale with journal reputation, not with costs. So that backs up that what they're selling us isn't actually the open access, because we can have that from lots of journals. What they're selling us is the impact, which varies strongly journal to journal. Hybrid journals charge on average 65% higher author fees than the Gold OA journals, and those hybrid journals are also still collecting subscription fees. So another thing I want you to know about open access is that it's growing significantly. Currently, 28% of new papers are published open access, and that's driven by a 20-year increase in green, gold, and hybrid open access. And then on this plot, you can also see bronze, which is a term that these authors invented for papers that you can get, but they are not licensed open access. So like if somebody just like posted a PDF that's really supposed to be behind a paywall, that's bronze. So in total, bronze and the real open access formats account for almost half of new papers. The data shows that that is working. Open access papers have 20% more citations than papers that are published not open access after you control for the size and volume of publishing in the discipline, the impact factor of the journal, and all the other variables you can think of. 20% more citations on an open access paper. And that means that people who want to read and cite it, producers of research, are also benefiting from this. Okay, so with that in mind, we return to the flowchart we were looking at before, where we left it. We have a paywall that's blocking stakeholder access to information produced by the researchers. So the solution to getting around the paywall, which the publication companies are supporting, is Gold Open Access. And that does away with the subscription fee from universities. They don't have to pay for that anymore because all of the papers are going to be made free online. But that's compensated by this massive increase in the green arrow of author fees. So the researchers are actually shouldering the financial burden. And it's pretty obvious what the effect of that is that people, individuals like you and me, are going to be priced out of publishing, and people who are less well-funded won't be able to participate at all. They won't have a choice because open access is going to be mandated by the funding agencies. So what is the actual cost of publishing a paper? Like I said, it's $18.50 is the average in the natural sciences. It's $1,800 is the average across all disciplines. Several studies, longitudinal studies, really big scale, have shown that the actual cost to the publisher is somewhere between $200 and $1,000 per article. Most of the papers, the cost is close between $200 and $400. That high end of $1,000 comes from big journals that actually employ full-time editors, professional editors, instead of having volunteer researchers act as editors. And is also coming from those journals that have a very high rejection rate, so that paid editor is handling a lot of papers and only publishing a few. And the amount by which the average author charge has increased in the past decade across all disciplines is 10% per year. So I don't have to tell you that nothing else has increased that at that rate, because here is the consumer price index for the US in red squares and the EU in blue triangles across that time. And the black dots show the increase in open access author processing charges over that time. We already have this cultural issue around publish or perish in research science. And if we add this layer of pay to play, we're ending up in a regime of pay or perish. So here's what I want you to think about. Publishers sell back to us what we give them for free. The impact and the prestige of journals only comes from the respect that we have for one another and who is lending their reputation to that journal. Research assessment is obviously contributing to this problem, because the competition between researchers using journal rankings as a proxy for quality metrics has created a market in which publishers can charge whatever they want because their acceptance is so valuable for the individual researchers. But we can take back control of this process. We can reduce costs, and we can take what revenues are generated from publishing and focus that into things that benefit our community and the public, instead of passing it off to corporate shareholders. So there's the two kind of families of solutions that are being promoted. So the first one is, let's move to gold open access, everybody go gold, but organize payment of author fees to keep things a little bit more sane. So that could be something like, there's a open access publication budget that's tacked onto grants. Maybe the employers or the libraries should pay and collectivize, like making read and write agreements like the UC finally settled on with Elsevier. This is what's being promoted by the companies because it doesn't actually induce that much price pressure, and it's not very transformative. The second group of solutions is a little bit more disruptive, with the potential to be more effective and more transformative for academic publishing. So first, we could look at very large-scale agreements, national agreements. That still has the problem of it's leaving that up to individual bodies, and some have more bargaining power than others. In the same vein, we could have price caps. NSF could say, you can't write an APC check that's bigger than $1,000. We won't pay for it, and see how the journals respond. We could just use market pressure. Every one of us decide that if that journal's putting too much money into corporate profits, I won't submit my paper there, or I won't review for them. That should work. We could switch to rapid public archiving instead of having everything have to be vetted by our slow and clunky peer review process. And many areas of physics are basically doing this. Computer science has done it because publishing is just too slow. Or the solution I'm going to talk to you about today is to return to a more grassroots publishing model with low or no author fees, so either totally free or at cost. And if we're going to go that way, then we have this really unique opportunity. We have a moment where we can say, if we started over from scratch, what would we want a journal to do? And that's where we started with Seismica, thinking about if we're not beholden to rankings or profits or anything else, how can we feed back benefits to our community? How can we help people improve as authors and reviewers and editors? How can we make sure that the results of our research are available in a useful form for as many people as possible? So through about 1.5 years of discussions, we settled on 5 core values that have driven the design of Seismica what it is today. Accessible, transparent, respectful, credible, and progressive. So that's the philosophy that went into the design of our new journal. So what is Seismica? It's a community-driven diamond open access journal for peer-reviewed research in seismology and earthquake science. It is free to publish, free to read. Who is Seismica? Right now, the Seismica board is 47 of your friends and colleagues. Some of them are sitting in the room with you today. We come from all over the world, lots of different career stages and disciplinary backgrounds. If you want to know how we're different, here's an overview of some of the things we're running now and some of the things we'll be building over the first year or two of operation. So the first thing is we were built to be global, diverse, inclusive, and useful. So we have expertise in equity diversity and inclusion that came into the fundamentals of building our policy creation. We also have experts in open science principles. So those ideas are built into our author guidelines. We designed a suite of article types that would recognize that not only scientific advances are worth sharing, that there are a lot of other products and insights that are really useful to our community. So we have a suite of different types of reports, in addition to traditional research articles and reviews and editorials. And that having a number of different reports also opens the door to publication, to participating in publication for people who are not writing just traditional journal articles. So maybe people who are working in earthquake science in the public sector, but not in a research environment or in the private sector. And critically, like all of these concepts, our knowledge of them and our understanding of best practices are changing rapidly at this point. So we have a frequent cycle of self-review and going over our policy so that Seismica can move and adapt as we get better at these things. For the individual who's going to interact with Seismica as an author, an editor, or reviewer, we all have stories about times when things didn't go right. You know, a biased review that was passed through to an author who was hurt by that, or a reviewer who worked really hard and then got ignored by the editor. And so to try to increase the skill level and the competency across the board, we have editorial mentoring that's now up and running. We're developing best practices, and we have a shared discussion forum for handling editors to help with difficult decisions. We're also looking at developing reviewer mentoring and best practices, workshops and webinars to help people get better at reviewing critically and helpfully and competently. So how are we running with no money? Two things make this possible. One is that we have the support of the McGill University Library. So they are hosting our website, providing tech support, and they are paying for DOI assignment, ISSN listing, and eventually they'll support our impact factor application when we're eligible to apply. On top of that, we have a lot of skilled people who are in non-traditional journal roles. We're run and visioned by this team of 5 executive editors that have as our portfolios open science, EDI, operations, production, and community. That's me. Then we have these functional teams, media and branding, tech, fast reports editing, and standards and copy ed. And then we have our handling editors who cover the disciplines included in our scope. Their role is very similar to that at other journals, but they are led by the mentoring committee, which is 5 very experienced editors who are a resource for everybody on the team. If you want more details about Seismica, we're well represented at this meeting. Tran Nguyen, who's our media and branding chair, is going to be presenting a poster today. So there's lots of opportunity to learn more about us. But now, if anything else I've said to you today feels salient and you're like, well, I don't want to start my own journal, but I'd like to hear about ways that I could shift my practices to kind of help move the community in this direction, I have 4 sets of recommendations for you. First is think about your community. Consciously think about who is the audience for your research. So first, you can make your data, figures, code, and preprints easy to find and easy to use to help generate further research activity based on your work. Think about how your article could reach the most people. Don't just think about your colleagues and competitors, but really think about people outside the research community who might benefit from this when you're choosing your publication venue. Thinking about researchers who are outside of the well-funded bubble, who need venues that they can afford to support to publish their research in. Your support for Diamond Open Access journals and low and no cost publishing helps strengthen those entities so that they can provide that service to the less well-funded researchers. 2, vote with your time and funds. This is our currency. If you're supporting a journal with your volunteer labor and your money, is that resource going back to the community? Like if you're supporting a society published journal, or is it just going to the corporation? Okay, second, the big 5 publishers spend a lot of money lobbying our congresspeople and trying to prevent the control over academic publishing going back into the hand of actual researchers. So if you're supporting the big 5 publishers, you're also supporting those lobbying activities, fighting against open science. And third, the physicists have given us an example of how to pressure the publishing companies for change, because they basically said, we archive on arXiv, and if you don't let us, we won't publish in your journal. And so there's an exception at Elsevier that allows for archiving physics papers and then still submitting them and publishing them in Elsevier journals. So if we organized a little bit more, we could actually push against the publishers and change some of the restrictive policies. Okay, third, this is maybe the hardest thing to do because it's such a big structural problem with the academic community, but do not multiply the impact hype. Do not fall for journal prestige as a proxy for excellence in hiring, tenure, promotion, awards, choosing collaborators, etc. Ask yourself, how many really good, super impactful papers might not be published in Nature because of the cost? Probably a lot. How many papers in high impact journals are splashy but potentially scientifically flawed? Probably a lot of papers. Okay, last, most importantly, ask your librarian. We all have on our campuses experts who can help walk us through how to make small changes that make a big difference. Okay, librarians can help you with open science practices in your data, code, and publishing, help you post your preprints in repositories. They can help you negotiate with publishers to get a better deal on copyright transfers and author fees. They can help you understand Creative Commons licenses so you can take these other products of your research and make them available with confidence that they'll only be used with attribution and for the purposes that you want. They can help you with archiving and journal selection, so find out which of your favorite journals that you like to submit to are actually compliant with the open access requirements. They can also help you from the beginning of your research project employ best practices that contribute to ease in making things open at the end. And libraries often have fee waivers or available funds to support open access publishing. So unfortunately, I'm out of time, but I hope you have some questions, and I thank you very much. And if you want to see the reference list for the talk, please download the slide deck. Thank you very much.